black coffee.
This is the Exchange Coffee Podcasting Network. Coffee people talking to coffee people about coffee and things coffee adjacent. This episode of The Exchange is brought to you by Kavoya Specialty Coffee, where coffee is always a collaborative voyage. Welcome to the Exchange Coffee Podcast, hosted by Mark Inman and Todd Mackey. This is episode 42, and the topic is Our Coffee Stories. Kavoya's managing director, Rob Stephen, joins us in the studio as we all share just a few favorite coffee stories and memories. And now, here they are, Mark and Todd, and Mike and Rob too.
Hey friends, Mark Inman here, of course with my esteemed co-host Todd and producer Mike. And today we have a special guest on Storytelling Day, Rob Stephen, the boss.
We'll just go with Rob Stephen. That's good.
The boss.
Thank you so much for carving out some time for us.
Happy to be here.
How long was the walk down from the top of the mountain?
Well, you know, I had to take the elevator from the 54th floor down here to floor
to
2.
The basement.
Yeah.
So we're talking coffee stories today, and I guess the most appropriate way to get that started is before we can talk about coffee stories, we got to talk about getting into coffee. So let's start with you, Mike. How did you get into coffee?
Let's see, 1998, I was finishing up graduate school and getting my MFA in writing, which is like an invitation to be poor. So I was trying to decide what I wanted to do. And at that time, your sort of choices, you were looking at maybe teaching, you know, with the degree, or go into this new thing that we were all being heavily recruited to do, and they called it content. Because I was basically living in Silicon Valley, and we were being heavily recruited from people who had graduated the year before and gone into content. So that was sort of, do I want to teach? I had taught some, and it wasn't for me. So I was looking at this content thing, and it just seemed sort of this internet thing. I didn't know if it was going to last.
This trend.
Yeah. And
Jury's still out, Mike. Jury's still out.
And one day, one of my fellow classmates, she was older, she had retired, and she said, I need to take you to lunch. And so we went to lunch, and it was all about her saying, she just said, you need to go into marketing and communications. She goes, that's what I did, you know, all my life. And I see that that's what you should be doing. And I was like, okay. I mean, I didn't have any better ideas. I'd come out of nonprofit work, so I still wanted to stay in the nonprofit arena. So that's where I looked. And one day there was an ad in a nonprofit. It was called Open Door or something. It was a nonprofit job listing newsletter. And it was for the Specialty Coffee Association of America. And went down and interviewed with Ted Lingle and got the job.
Had you done much research on SCAA or Ted Lingle at the time?
Oh, no. I had no idea.
You went in totally cold.
Yeah. Wow.
For the most part. I mean, I'm sure I went to their website and came in, and he sat me down, and before we even got in the office, sat me down in the lobby, and I had to write a press release on the spot cold, and which was a good test.
Wow, that's great. Fortunately,
I knew what I was doing, and then we sat in his office for like an hour and a half. And something of our temperaments, you know, we hit it off. We're both introverts. And,
yeah.
Are you?
So that's it. And then I got in, but I wasn't really in coffee yet. I used to say I wasn't a coffee person. I was a coffee people person. I was in the coffee people business. So about 7 years later, I wanted to be in coffee. So I left and went to work for some roasters and for this guy, Mr. Rob.
Yeah.
And here I am. So that's my story.
Well, let's slide to the big boss man,
Really
Mr.
need
Rob
you guys
Stephen.
to stop saying that.
We can edit it in post, right? Well, I guess that's a producer
We
question.
could, but we could also
It's not
leave it
our
in.
choice. We put the sauce out on things.
In the
and
post, I'm
Mike,
going to edit it out and put in El Jefe.
Mike will
With a badly
will make the choice.
with a badly dubbed voice like
That'd be fantastic. I'd like that.
They called me El Jefe.
Let's see the abridged version of how I got into coffee. So 1989, 88, 89, my metal band came off the road. What I thought was for a little while turned out to be permanently. And I was in a place where I think my net worth when I made the decision that I had to get a real job was $7. So I ended up with a job in a coffee shop when I was as basically a holdover so that I could eat while I was trying to get a job as an assistant or apprentice brewer at Boston Beer Works. And I had this crazy interview with the guy at Boston Beer Works where I told him I would, scrub the vats for free and, work another job and do that one for free so I could learn the trade. And he pulled out a spiral notebook with like 5 pages of names. And there was 3 at the top on the first page that were highlighted. And he said, all these people have given me the same pitch. And the 3 that are highlighted have degrees in brewing technology from the Seibel Institute. And I was like, okay. So walked out of there with my tail between my legs and went back to my barista job. But I was working at Coffee Connection in Harvard Square, which was CC1, the very first Coffee Connection. And they had this really big, ornate retail counter. It was about selling beans and coffee equipment. And I guess I was good with people, so they put me behind that and started teaching me more and more about coffee. And then they sent me to the roasting plant to do this like training on coffee. And that's where I met their roast master and the person who was buying most of the coffee, and he was traveling, and he just basically started talking about what he did and what he did for a living and how, he traveled the world and found, and I just sort of felt the whole universe click into place and said, finally something I actually both want to do and can do. And that was really my start. So from there, I pursued various increasing responsibility jobs in coffee, figured out where the money was, and found lots of good people along the way, including the 3 of you in this room.
Aw.
It's a good thing. That's
Yeah.
a feel-good moment.
Yeah.
It's a nice story. I entered the industry quite a bit later than you guys. Maybe not a surprise to our listeners. As
Did
I've
Rob
made
tie a date? When was your...
He did.
He did?
He said 1989, which, I'd like to highlight. Rob said he was coming off of the road in his metal band, or did you say hair metal band?
No, metal.
I don't think there was a sub-distinction.
No.
But either way, there's a metal band. Yeah. And, for all those music lovers out there, of which there are many in specialty coffee, 1991 is a very important year. And I wonder if 1991 coincided at all with the surprise shift in musical opportunities.
Well, 1991 would be the year that both Nirvana and Pearl Jam killed me and all of my friends' musical dreams for the rest of our lives.
Which is Nirvana's Nevermind.
Yes. Yeah.
Right.
And Pearl Jam 10?
Yeah. And if you weren't wearing flannel at that point, you were already out. So that was the point.
Got it.
Yeah.
All right. Well, sorry to bring it up.
That's okay.
Great albums, though.
Yeah. 1987,
Seminal albums.
Appetite for Destruction, 1991, 10. Between those two, the most chaotic musical time for me ever. But fun.
Memories.
Memories.
I found myself getting into specialty coffee pretty much unknown to me that I could begin a career in specialty coffee at the time. Maybe this was similar to how you're describing it. But I was in a touring band and had come off the road, and I had moved on the fly. I didn't think I was going to stay, but I had moved to Providence, Rhode Island, where we find ourselves downtown on Westminster Street here recording The Exchange, Cool Specialty Coffee. I found myself needing some sort of what we could call now in today's terms gig work. And I wanted to be a bartender because that would be more exciting and more money for seemingly less work, or at least less hours. But in a very thirsty town like Providence, getting shifts on bar, especially when you wanted to come and go and tour, this was not something that was easy or readily available. So I started making coffee at a coffee bar. And this was a scratch bakery, which is beloved in Providence food history, Olga's Cup and Saucer.
R.I.P.
And I spent a few years there managing front of house and learning about food and learning about local farming and where those intersect. I learned about coffee. We had a great roaster who was still a great roaster, and I was then invited to go work for them. So that was kind of the advent of my specialty coffee career.
Wow. What was the roaster?
2005.
2005.
2005. And the roaster is New Harvest Coffee.
Oh, yes. Right, of course. All right. So for me, 1988, so a year before Rob, I was interning in Oregon at a winery. I was going to school to be a winemaker.
I was 6 years old. I had just completed kindergarten.
Right.
Continue.
And how old were you, Mike?
Yeah. I was a full-grown man at that point. And so I was interning at a winery and living in Portland, Oregon, 1988. Great time to be in Portland. But was a broke student and saw on the job board at our college that they had a gig for a coffee taster for an event, for a competition, and it was paying $600 for the day. And at that time, $600 was almost 3 months' rent for me. It was an amazing amount of money. So I thought, I got a wine palate. I'll go in there and dazzle, we sipping some cups of coffee. How hard can that be? Went to the event. They had a training prior to and learned cupping and was pretty humbled by how complex that process was and was intrigued by it. I didn't drink coffee at the time, or at least not seriously, and did the competition. And then they had the award. It was called the Portland Cup. It was a competition back in the day. And at the awards event, I met Gary Talboy, who owned Coffee Bean International. It was one of the, I don't know if he was a founder of SCAA, but certainly was one of the early presidents of the SCAA. And he and I hit it off. We chatted about the similarities and differences between coffee and wine. And I had, didn't really even understand the whole coffee industry as far as what was happening. And he and I maintained this kind of correspondence and introduced me to Jim and Patty Roberts, who owned Coffee People, the chain. And at that time, CBI was an investor in Coffee People. And they said, look, we want you to come work for us. We think, you have this. I have a retail background from my father's company and management experience and this wine background, and they thought they could use me. And so they put me in charge of one of their highest performing stores. I was still really young, but I remember calling my father and said, look, I'm going to bail on wine. I'm going to go into coffee. I think there's something happening here. I just think there's this movement. And he said, you're insane. Like, you're leaving an industry that has endless potential for employment, and you're going into a dead industry. He goes, nobody cares about coffee. Nobody drinks coffee that's under the age of 50. I mean, what are you doing? And so against his advice, I left wine. And then about a year later, at that point, Coffee People had 17 stores, and we were pretty dominant brand in the Pacific Northwest, but Starbucks was like at our heels, and they had come down to Portland and had started building stores, and we were obsessed about them at management meetings at Coffee People. And I remember calling my dad. I said, look, there's this company going public. I think you should buy stock in it. I'm putting my Christmas bonus in. I can't tell my boss, because if I do it, I'll get fired. But I'm going to invest in this little company out of Seattle called Starbucks. I think you should do it. And he goes, you're insane. You're going to lose money that you work for off a stock again. Who's buying this stock? And within a year, I had like quadrupled my money and bought a house with cash back in California. And at that point, my dad had reached back to me and said, look, I could have been a billionaire if I would have invested. Like, I can't believe I didn't listen to you on that one. And at that point, the industry started taking off. But within a short time, I think it was by 1991, Coffee People was sold off to a Canadian company called Second Cup. And I didn't want to stay on. And I had an opportunity to be a head roaster and buyer back in Sonoma County. And that's really started me on the roasting journey. But yeah, that was my entry into the industry.
All right. So story time.
I really find myself in this cloud with you all, I find myself wanting to step back and to just hear what it was like before I got here. Right? So why don't we go back into those early
Back
days?
before the war, Daddy.
Yeah.
When specialty coffee was really the
When
frontier.
Todd was 8. SCAA 2000. Rob and I were young lads on these committees, and we had at that point formed our own association in protest of the SCAA because we felt that they were not addressing sustainability enough or adequately enough. And the association we formed was called the Organic Coffee Association of America. We received some seed funding from Green Mountain Coffee and Frontier Coffee, and Ted, I think, was somewhat humored by what we were doing and allowed us a lot of freebies at that event. And I think part of it was that he was wrangling us to think about us as future board members because he saw this enthusiasm, but he was going to let us kind of spin it out and then say, now bring it in the tent. But that was my first story for today. And I see Rob over there showing us his note that Orca was mentioned.
This is one of my stories. Yeah.
Well, yeah, we had meetings about you guys because the previous year in Philadelphia, you guys were going sort of rogue.
Yeah.
You didn't rent a room. You
Right.
took
We
a room.
hijacked a room.
You hijacked a room. So we had meetings. And Ted's just like, just invite them in.
Right.
Just invite them in.
I remember us saying that. The two notes I can think of from that story is one is us saying to each other in a serious way, well, when we have our convention, we'll give SCA a room. And the other one was the buttons.
Oh, the buttons. Adam Teitelbaum.
We had gone out and made all these buttons to hand out that said, if it's not organic, it's not sustainable.
This is a job that Rob gave to Adam Teitelbaum of Adam's Organics, rest in peace. And Rob had given him the task. We all had jobs to make buttons for the show.
Yeah, and the buttons came back, and it was everyone as he's passing them out, and everyone's going, "These are cool." I'm looking at it and going, "We spelled organic wrong."
Yeah, which is true. And it was like Rob took like not even a millisecond glance. He goes, "That's misspelled," and then we're like, "Oh my
We got
god!"
a box with 5,000 buttons.
Yeah, right.
Yikes! That conference was the last conference that Rob had long hair.
That's true.
Is that right?
Yeah, because 2000 was when I started working for Dunkin' Donuts.
Oh, and that's right, and professionalize up.
Yeah. And do you remember the keynote? He was an author.
Paul Hawken.
Yeah, Paul Hawken.
Yeah,
I remember
Hawken. He wrote The Ecology of Commerce.
Yeah, and I remember him saying that you guys don't understand how far ahead of the curve you are as an industry. That just by having this conference and have the theme be sustainability, you're light years ahead of other industries.
And I totally agreed with him at that time. I do think we were ahead of the curve, and we had managed to pull in all of the important players in sustainability to help us define the industry. And somewhere between, I mean, I can't put the blame on any one group in particular, but somewhere we lost that quickly, and it turned into all the front end, the retail side. It was about baristas and competing and drink making and everything except for how the coffee was built. And what we were talking about then was how to build coffee from the ground up and instead of from the drink backwards. Yeah. And I just feel like, and I don't know if you two know when that shift happened, but it was a disturbing shift.
Yeah, but you must have been sitting front row when you were on the board of WBC. Like, this whole initiative was to drive interest in the coffees you were suggesting to be built from the ground up, right? Like, I mean, wasn't it the strategy to say, well, we could build the coffees, but if we don't have a market for them that is ready to understand and appreciate, like...
Oh, I don't think that's what it was about. I think the kind of the sustainability movement was trying to build great coffees and build great communities and strengthen disenfranchised people in the developing world. I don't think that the sustainability side was thinking about where does that coffee go. It certainly, because none of the coffees that were being competed with at that time were of that ilk. They were just whatever. But even then, that catapulted to where this just became about cup quality and cup flavor and what you can do with coffee, and rather than where did it come from, how is it grown, who are the people behind growing it, what was the impact on those people, that all disappeared. And then it became almost like the sustainability movement was, the moniker was, well, it's great, it's cute what's going on, but they're producing inferior product. And I just totally I just didn't agree with that statement. And then I became my personal mission to prove them wrong.
Well, my take on that is that sustainability became certification became a synonym for sustainability.
Yeah.
And certification was wildly successful.
Yeah.
Right. I mean, if you think about it, we were trying to start the Organic Coffee Association at a time when organic coffee was almost nothing. It was bad in quality, and there was very little of it, and it was hard to know what was certified. Just in our company alone,
right.
We trade more on a daily basis than probably existed in the right in the world.
Annual production.
Yeah. And so it's the excitement is a casualty of the success, right?
Right.
I mean, you got companies like ours and many others that are doing things at scale and sustainability, right? It's not a revolution anymore. So,
right.
So it's not exciting.
Right.
You know what I mean?
Yeah. And back then there was full on, and there was a lot of efforts that were empty, that where we took things too far. Like there was a Measure O in Berkeley that was around the same year, I believe, that was launched by a lawyer, and it was trying to mandate that any coffee sold within the city limits of Berkeley needed to be fair trade certified. And if like, say, a 7-Eleven or somebody that wasn't doing it, that individual citizens can sue the company.
That took up so much of my time.
And there was, and there was a debate at UC Berkeley about this subject matter. And I remember I'm thinking, okay, well, Pete's is going to be the natural person debating this lawyer. And I received a call from Jerry Baldwin. It's like, we can't do this. You're an organic guy. You're a roaster in the area. You can speak to this, and I would encourage you to do this. So I went and debated the guy, and it was more of debating like your version. I can't legislate my version of good to you, because this movement, this organic and fair trade movement, has its own merits to grow on. I can't force feed you, my version of it. And if we force it, whenever it becomes a loophole to take it away or some opportunity, people will abandon those movements permanently. And, obviously when the election happened, that particular measure failed by a spectacular margin. It was so wildly impractical. But
Pete's couldn't be public, but they were definitely involved. Every opposition meeting I was in, Jim was there.
Oh, I'm sure they were. Yeah. They had to be at the time. So there were efforts like that I felt were just being too hardcore. There was the student movement within universities to force colleges to carry fair trade coffee that I think had various levels of success. But one of the other stories that happened off this that I believe did have a huge area of success, and then had really perpetuated a lot of the travel that we talk about, for better or for worse, or people that became like travel junkies and built careers on talking about this, was Paul Katzeff, who was the president at the time, was he had somehow convinced USAID that we could stop the spread of communism by teaching the most disenfranchised producers in Nicaragua to be able to professionally evaluate coffee and taste coffee. And if we gave them the same skills that estates had, that they would, be less apt to be communists, they would be more apt to be capitalists, which was not at all a part of what Paul was trying to do. But he successfully received, I believe it was around $10 million, and took myself, when I had TaylorMade, Intelligentsia, Batdorf and Bronson, Counterculture, Thanksgiving Coffee, to 10 of the poorest regions in Nicaragua. And we physically built cupping laboratories at these co-ops, and then spent a year training young kids, because I believe there was a cap on the age. It was teaching young people to be cuppers, to be, mill managers, to be agronomists. And again, we were building great coffee. We were learning how to do that, but it required us to travel, because a lot of us, like when Rob was at Frontier and I was at TaylorMade, back then there were very few places, that were certified organic. And so really for us to build a supply channel, we had to physically go down there and do it in conjunction with an importer at the time. And that necessitated a lot of travel. And then that somewhat became popularized. Like, to be a buyer, you have to travel a lot. Well, not necessarily if you were just buying run-of-the-mill coffee, because there's a lot of access to that coffee, but doing things like fair trade coffee or bird friendly or triple cert, a lot of people are doing bird friendly, organic, and fair trade. You had to physically build that supply channel. That wasn't available to you.
So maybe switch gears a little bit.
Sure.
I'm going to tell a story. It goes back to probably 2000 as well. Just a few years at SCAA, and one of my jobs was PR. I talked an average of 4 reporters a day while there, and I got a call from this TV show producer. It was a show called Uncovered. That's what he told me the show was, and they wanted to do a segment. They were doing a thing on coffee, and they wanted to come down and do a segment talking to the experts type thing. And I'm like, oh man, you know what? We'll set up a cupping. I'll have Ted Lingle and Don Holly sit down with correspondent and cup coffee, and you can ask them a question. I thought, oh, this is so great. I felt like it was a coup, So they come there, camera crew. There's the correspondent, perfect hair guy. And we set up the cupping table with them, the 3 sort of on one side so they could face the camera. And the guy starts asking questions, and Ted and Don are very seriously engaging these questions. And I noticed the guy sort of, as they're talking, he's sort of mugging for the camera. You start to get the feeling that these coffee nerds
Yeah.
And then we go to start cupping, and he's like lifting the spoon up, and he's making this weird face at the camera. He's just totally mugging. He's like, and he over exaggerates his slurping. And I'm like, what the hell is going on? So I went back to my office, and I never made this mistake again. I went back to my office and looked up the show on the internet and found out the name of the show was actually National Enquirer Uncovered.
Oh, no.
And see, I thought it was like one of these going to be uncovered. I thought, it's going to be like how it's made or something like that. So it was, for those who don't know, National Enquirer was and still is a celebrity gossip rag. And so it was obvious right away as soon as I saw that what they were doing was sort of a hit piece on specialty coffee based on the questions he was asking. Like, it's a big con. Like, we're charging so much for coffee.
Oh, okay.
And so that specialty coffee and Starbucks and all the big retail chains and all the trend of specialty coffee is just this big con job. And so I went back and we finished up, and the guys started asking me, can we need to do B-roll? And I said, nope. I said, no more, we're done. And I didn't want to piss him off because I, didn't want to make it worse. But and it was clear that he knew that now I knew, and that this is not the first time that this had happened to him. And fortunately, the show, it was only on the air for a few years. It didn't even show in our market. And where it was broadcast, it was on at like 1 or 2 in the morning. So I only got one phone call. Chuck Jones, a cousin, a relative or something, had seen it. And did you see this thing on TV about they were saying that, it's a big ripoff and specialty coffee's not real. And fortunately, hardly anybody saw it, but
is that on YouTube? Could you?
No, I've never been able to find it. I've searched and I can't find it.
Wild.
Wow.
Yeah.
That would be amazing.
So lesson learned, if you called me up on the phone, the first thing I did was research who you were. Never made that mistake again.
And that was in San Francisco as well. That same event, or did they do it off-site?
No, they came to the office.
They came to the
in
office.
Long Beach, yeah.
Guys, we spelled organic wrong.
If it's not organic, it's not sustainable. So
Who's next?
Rob?
Yeah, I made this very short list of stories, and I was accused of coming in here without paper, but it's just a picture of paper instead.
It is a picture of paper.
Because I wanted it to be sustainable. No, I'm just kidding. I still use the paper. And it's funny, I sort of had these short stories in groups of, I was trying to make some sense of it and why they stuck out to me. And I think it's because it's different things that the events in the story taught me about myself and about the industry at the same time. And the other thing I wanted to say about stories in general is that if you're ever part of those travel, green coffee trips and origin trips and stuff like that, you spend an inordinate amount of time in cars. And you're in cars with people that, 6-7 hours on bumpy roads, plus dinner, plus this. And if you don't have stuff to talk about, it's pretty brutal. So I got really good at listening to stories and telling stories, which is why one of the reasons that it's sort of part of the company DNA where we are now. I think stories are a really awesome way to talk about what you learned in a way that's relatable. So I dig this. It's kind of cool. So one of the stories that I like to tell people is about, and I don't know if a lot of people know this about me, but I was an apprentice roaster at Pete's. And this is pre-public days, and I should preface this with nobody who was at Pete's during the time of the story is there now, and they are owned by different people, and it's public and all sorts of stuff. But I was living and working on the East Coast, just outside of Washington D.C., for a company called Quartermain. I was their roaster, but they really wanted me to step it up, so Jerry Baldwin was an investor in Quartermain, so he was able to open the door for me to go out and be an apprentice at Pete's. And so they sent me out to California, my first trip to California ever, my first trip to the West Coast ever, my first time on a plane more than an hour. I was basically a kid. Their roasting plant was in Emeryville, and it was basically be at this address at 4 a.m. and no other instructions, right? So, I show up, I knock on the door. The door opens like, I don't even get like the boom, boom. I get the first knock and the door opens like Kramer from Seinfeld, like just that amount of energy. And John Weaver's standing there and he leans out the door and he looks me up and down like with this really intense face. And then he just makes a hand motion like, come in, right? Says nothing. And I come in.
John Weaver was the head roaster at the time. Yeah.
Yeah, he was a master roaster at Pete's. Right. And he's a super cool dude, but he's also extremely intense, right? And, and he just like looks at me and then he kind of looks around and he points at a big pile of green coffee next to the loader and he just like motions with his hand, like put that in there, right? And this went on all day until 3:00 in the afternoon and nobody else spoke to me either. Like not one word was uttered to me the entire day. Like, and I was, became very apparent to me that this was a thing. Like we are not going to talk to this guy. And but I didn't know that, I didn't know how long that was going to last.
Right.
By the end of the day, I was so rattled. I was like,
sure.
And I had even learned some things. I'd watched what they were doing, but nobody was speaking to me. And I was just like, oh,
is this because they were annoyed with the fact that some company, like owners,
I had all day to speculate. Like, is it because I was forced on these guys? Is it because they didn't want to do it? Is it because they're too busy? It's because they don't like me. Oh, it must be because they don't like me. Of course they don't like me. How could anybody like me? Yeah, all that kind of stuff, right? And I'm just beside myself. But the next day, I showed up and I walked in the door and they went, "Hey, Rob."
Yeah.
Right. And it was smooth sailing from then on. And after a while, I'd been there for like a week and a half and I was like, what was up with day one? And they're like, we're not teaching this stuff to just anybody.
Right.
Want to see who you are and see if you're really into this or not. And that was like my first lesson on like resilience. If you're going to get the goods, you got to be willing to show up and listen and sometimes prove yourself even when you don't feel like you should. I mean, Jerry Baldwin sent me there. I didn't think I was like, I'm good. I'm in, right?
Yeah.
No, you're not in. We'll teach you if we want to teach you.
Right.
Yeah. So I always look back on that, like, especially now, like, we hire a lot of new people and it's like anytime someone comes in and they're like, just give it to me now. I'm like, maybe we won't talk to you for a day.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah. We don't get to that, but
I'm going to cheat and do a 30-second story to piggyback on Rob's story.
Sure.
Just because it's a Steve Colton story, one of my favorite, but Steve didn't want to follow in his father's footsteps into coffee.
Steve Colton of Atlantic.
Yeah.
Ecom.
Yeah.
In New York.
Didn't want to follow in his father's footsteps into coffee. He wanted to go into finance, I think. It was something else. Got a graduate degree, went out into the world, was not happy, decided to go into coffee. Showed up at his at where his dad was a boss.
Yeah, bigwig there.
Yeah, and he shows up for work his first day. They take him to the cupping lab and they give him a broom to sweep up. And he goes, "I have 2 degrees." And the guy goes, "So you want 2 brooms?"
That's awesome.
Yeah.
I remember Rob and I did the first Q test in New York. It was at the Exchange, the ice pre-ice. I forget. Yeah. And there's a picture of Steve Colton, father, at a cupping table, and he's got to be like 90 years old, just hunched over with a spoon, and that guy was revered at an office like that. It was incredible.
Toddley.
I have a story that I want to hear more about. This is one that, and I think that there certainly was an age as I was coming into specialty coffee, especially in the days of the guilds, the Roasters Guild, and then, of course, the Barista Guild, where, there were a lot of events. There was a strong grassroots community, volunteer, organized and run.
Right.
And there were tons of stories. And I mean, there were years, many of those events we've attended together. But there were stories from prior events that lived, that people would say, were you there when? And one of these stories, I've been there for a lot of these stories, but this story I always heard about. And I'm like, I wonder what actually happened. This is the year someone stepped in the fire. They tried to jump over the fire at Roasters Guild. I believe it was in Wisconsin.
Yeah,
Is that
no,
right?
it was in
Minnesota.
at Sugar Lake Lodge.
Okay.
Who was it?
I don't remember who the person was, but what led up to that was it was the first, or maybe it wasn't the first year, it was the last year for sure, of the SCA providing free beer at events. And so
That can't be true.
Oh yeah,
That cannot be
after
true.
that event, the Roasters Guild was not. I mean, they could throw up, like, you could bring liquor to, but they
would
not,
have third-party companies. It wouldn't be the SCAA.
the SCA brought a keg and.
But I'm saying, many Roasters Guilds after that.
Yeah, but
this was even
that's all
before I
like
ever went to a Roasters Guild.
Either a sponsor or
They would have a sponsor do it.
Yeah, I have uttered these words at a Roasters Guild retreat. You can't put the keg on a boat.
right. Yeah. There was a lot of that going on back then.
Understood.
Yeah, I would go because I was on staff, so I was like the dad. And I would go into the boathouse and take all the boat keys.
Yeah, they
keep
would
them on my person.
That turned into like a drink ticket or 2 tickets, and then or buying, a cash
having
bar.
The black market for the tickets.
Right. Yeah. Exactly. But I was at that event. I wasn't fully immersed. I was on, I saw it happen. But what was happening was everybody got liquored up, and there's a group of people jumping over the fire. Like, there was multiple people doing it, and one person clipped their toe and fell face first into this, like a raging bonfire. This was not like a little campfire. It was a
They
big
fell face first into the fire.
and then got pulled out quickly. Yeah, and it.
Were you there for this?
I was at the place, but it wasn't around the bonfire when it happened.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, same here.
I mean, but he was pulled out. But it's not like he was burned alive.
If you were to fall into a fire, face first, hands first, I mean, what were the injuries like? I'm not asking for graphic
I think
description.
he was burned for sure. Yeah, he was injured. And then I believe there was rules around the bonfires. It wasn't just like us doing it and managing it. It was the lodge managing it after that point, wherever we were. But yeah, that person got injured, but it's not like they were scarred for life or anything insane like that.
The problem with those, especially back in the day, was half the people there, you could tell it was the first time they never left home.
Right.
It was the first time they were ever on a pass. It's just no one's watching me. I could just do whatever I want. And people went nuts. People went absolutely nuts. It was like this. Have you ever had a beer before? That.
Yeah, Roasters Guild.
Especially in the context of Roasters Guild,
Roasters
I feel like
Guild was
it's
different
a
than-
much more solitary job. So all of a sudden you're like, wait, there's other people who do this too?
Yeah.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah, and it wasn't necessarily like the company owner there or the head buyer. It was the production roaster that was there. And they may work for a small plant. They could have been 19, 20,
On
21
their
years
first
old.
business trip.
Right. Yeah, there was
stretching
a lot
the definition of that phrase, but
there were numerous stories at Roasters Guild where it's somebody getting in trouble because of just going way overboard. But as much as like that, I don't want to paint a bad light on it. I think the Roasters Guild was probably one of the most, the soul of the association, I think, resided there. I think the baristas would argue that the Barista Guild, and it probably was. But for me, from my perspective, being into many aspects of the industry, the Roasters Guild was a special group that I'm somewhat surprised has not reformed as an independent group now. I'm shocked it hasn't happened because the guilds are no longer part of SCA. Those are gone. But there's that desire to have it back. And
Are they no longer part of the SCA?
Yeah, no longer.
Yeah, they're gone. And there was a movement when Rob and I were on the board of directors of the Specialty Coffee Association of America that the Roasters Guild would threaten, the executive council would threaten to break off and do their own thing. There was always a constant threat of that, and we were dealing with that. And here is the opportunity to actually do it without any legal issue, because at that time the SCA owned and operated the Roasters Guild. You couldn't just walk away and call it the Roasters Guild. Now, I think you'd be quite successful if you were to form that now.
I don't know. I think it's the same reason that all these regional coffee events get really popular and then stop, is because you get to the point where someone doesn't want to put their house up to make the thing work.
Yeah, true.
Well, guilds, RIP, Roasters Guild, people jumping over the fire, Barista Guild.
Did the Barista Guild have anything like that? A story, Todd, similar?
The probably the one I'd put out into the ether here for our listeners, and just to see who's who, and if anybody wants to call in live to tell us.
Caller number 5 gets Todd's show notes with the autograph.
I have these hilarious memories at some early Barista Guild events of leg wrestling matches, like coffee famous people just laying on their backs, wrestling legs, like trading shots of whiskey. This was that was, I guess, the Barista Guild version of the fire jumping, but
and
R.I.P. BGA.
And obviously this was like liquor fueled before the leg wrestling, or this is stone sober people.
No, I to be honest, this particular instance, I was a midstream arrival, so I came upon the group at a certain part of the evening, and so I don't know exactly how, like, where it began, who suggested it, but it happened.
How does this compare to the legendary Costa Rican pool party?
Gary and Todd's pool party.
Yes. If you know, you know.
Yeah. So I led a trip for, so it was an SCAA at the time. They were doing an annual origin trip for the Roasters Guild and Barista Guild.
Oh, really?
And yeah.
How many people would show up on these trips?
It was a whole bus. So we had probably 30 people on the trip.
Wow.
And there needed to be a representative from the Barista Guild Executive Council, and we needed a representative from the Roasters Guild Executive Council. And so Paul Thornton was the Roasters Guild rep, and I was the Barista Guild rep, and this was either 2015 or 16, and we led a trip in Costa Rica. And I became close friends and remained so with a fantastic fellow Irish guy called Gary Reagan, who at the time was the head roaster for Square Mile in London. Spent a long time there. And we just became the sort of proverbial hosts of the daily pool party. So it was our responsibility to identify and promote a daily pool party, which we then had a corresponding hashtag Gary and Todd's pool party. So, there were a number of great events. There were all sorts of highlights, but we'll leave it at that. It was it's something I'm good at, and at some stage, if you're ever lucky enough to travel internationally with me, you'll see the fruits of all this experience.
I think we should bounce back to Rob.
Bounce back to me.
Yeah, what else you got, Mr. Steven? From so far on high.
From so far on high. Okay, well, I'll tell you a story about how I was brought low then. So in a similar vein. So I worked for 4 years at Dunkin' Donuts corporate, and so I was in charge of their coffee program, which was a master class in how the industry works, because it's big scale and thousands of stores and all sorts of various things that you're responsible for. And so in a nutshell, I was responsible for the Dunkin' Donuts coffee experience. So everywhere from where the coffee was grown and how it was processed and how it was imported and how it was blended and how it was roasted and how it was brewed. all the way down to how it was served, where you would then hand it off to the 16-year-old kid in the store who was thinking about anything other than what they were doing. So you had to make it sort of foolproof up to that point. And I took that job really seriously. I spent a lot of time out. I worked a lot of overtime and logged a lot of miles. And so the point of all that is I was putting in this massive amount of effort to sort of make coffee that tasted the same every time that you got it, which is the opposite of specialty. It's almost exactly the opposite of specialty. Specialty is about finding stuff that's special and different and cool and new, and this was use a whole different set of muscles, like make everything the same, even though you have all these variables going. So it helps you understand the variables. But so there I am thinking about all these variables, thinking that I've got all this control, and we have this focus group, which is the classic, like you see on TV, where it's like everyone, all the customers sitting around a conference table, and then there's a mirror, and yes, behind that mirror there are people sitting in comfortable chairs with notepads and listening to the audio and being able to push a button and have somebody ask a question, those kinds of things. And it was actually in the Providence Mall. So I was working in Massachusetts, but that was my first time coming to Providence as an adult, was to go to this focus group. And they had all these people who were regular refuelers, they called them. These are people who went to buy coffee at a Dunkin' Donuts at least 3 times a day, right?
Wow.
So this is like the store managers would nominate these people, like, you should talk to this, and they get paid to be there and all that thing, right? And I'm just sitting here going, all right, these are people who buy 3 cups a day of the thing that I work all my life to produce and help and make this, and I remember walking out of that for the first time in my life, really seriously contemplating just ending it all. Because like the number one thing when they were asked a question, like, what makes you pick Dunkin' over everybody else? They were like, it was things like, I just really love the way like that foam cup feels on my lips. I like to chew on it, and things like, the way the lid,
squeaks.
And like all these things, like there was like 50 reasons, and none of them had to do with what was in the cup or like the way that it tasted the same or anything. It was like everything but that. It was
my life is for nothing.
That was exactly how I felt walking out of there, and it's one of those things where every time we're talking to a customer or something like that, and they're talking about out there what they're doing, there's part of me that just like closes my eyes and goes, that's what we think you're doing it for.
Right. Yeah. I mean, that resonates with our game show recording.
Yeah. It's a humbling experience.
Was Matt Damon in that focus group?
No, he was not in that focus group. But I mean, the other thing about that focus group, I was like, the variety of people that were in that sort of frequent refueler thing. It was like, these people walk among us undetected. They're just, all of them were just, the second that they started talking about it, they lit up like a Christmas tree. Like, oh my God, I love this. It's the best. But it was like, guy who drives a truck, and then like, the soccer coach, and like it was everybody all over the place. It was really cool. But so, learned a lot, but I basically was brought about as low as I could possibly be brought.
Wow.
Yeah.
It's interesting though. I have to wonder, and I'm totally not trying to cruise past how devastating that must have been through the lens you were looking at it through, which is understandable. But like, if you weren't so dialed from a coffee standpoint, I have to imagine that the feedback would have been about coffee. Like, I have to imagine that the ability to think and assign value to all these other things kind of comes from the fact that this thing was so consistent and so held together to a degree, right? Like, I mean, hey, there's nothing wrong. I mean, people are always looking for the edge, the thing that sticks up, the thing that like sticks out, right?
Oh yeah. Oh, the packaging people were taking copious notes. The store ops people were taking. It was just me sitting there going, yeah, I thought I was the most important person in the room. Turns out I'm not important at all. Yeah.
Wow. Yeah,
but
crazy.
Rob was part of the team, led the team that introduced espresso drinks to Dunkin'.
Right.
And because I was the director of marketing at SEA, I was fortunate enough to be invited to the press conference in Boston where they introduced the whole thing. And they had the machines there that were going to be making the espresso shots. So after the presentation, we were all invited to go up and taste. So I took a shot of espresso and tasted it. Rob came up, and me and Ted Legal were standing there. He says, "What do you think?" And I said, I looked at him, he said, it's the best 7-second espresso I've ever tasted.
Is that right?
You got to work with what you got, Mike.
In light of coffee, specialty coffee specifically, like we all agree, stories are at the core of specialty coffee. Mm-hmm. Zooming out, what do you think is the most crucial kind of core story at work in specialty coffee that is the way that people connect to it or find value participating in it as a professional, as a consumer, as like that kind of theme, if you will, that functions on a story level, that keep people, as few as we've discovered there are in aspects through our game show with NCA's consumer questionnaire. But what is your perspective? What do you think it is from a story standpoint that hooks people?
It's the common denominator in all the stories we've told today, and it's a cliche, but it's people. I mean, every one of these stories has been, some about policy, but at the heart, it was about the people who were executing, for instance, sustainability policies and changes. All these stories have been about the people. And the reason we get hooked and the reason we stay is not for the coffee. We'll always have access to the coffee. It's for the people.
Yeah.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, I think that in coffee, we tell stories partly to tell who we are to the other person, but then we get to talk about how we have a common thing, which is coffee, or the lifestyle of coffee, or the business of coffee, or our appreciation for the product. But it's a vehicle to capture both when you do it. It's not just to talk about coffee. You end up revealing something of yourself or finding out something about the other person. So that's what I like about storytelling in general.
What's your answer, Todd?
No, I think you turn it on its head a bit for me. As I thought about that leading into this episode, my answer would have been immediately the story of discovery, right? Like, I think people love finding something that someone else hasn't. I think that specialty coffee drinkers love to connect to, much like other specialty products, wine, natural wines,
Sure.
beers, etc., foods. You want to have a story about something that you found that was a revelation, right? You want to have a story that makes something more than just what is in a particular cup, right? You want to have a story that makes you feel that the energy and time and the resources, whatever you've paid for something, makes it bigger than what it is, right?
Right. Kopi Luwak is one of those examples.
I think a lot of buyers, how many buyers have you worked with as a trader that essentially the hardest season that they're dealing with as a coffee buyer is when they don't have something to change.
Right.
Right? Like, hey, I'm doing great. Everything's on lock, right? All my values would point to see the course, stay with this. Consistent, repeat, stay faithful to this producer, etc. And that's when you're driven to throw a wrench in the machine, right? Or to do something different, right? I think discovery is a really core part of it. I think
That's a good point.
yes, so much of the marketing and so much of the posturing of the stories in coffee are about they have a Wild West type sensation to them of like, hey, you can't even imagine what the place this is from is like. And, so many of the reasons people feel connected to coffee, the irony of like someone who's just recently been on vacation and they're like, oh, I had some of the best coffee in the world in that origin country that 100% that best coffee left months ago. It's the stuff that stays around is not, or historically is not. So I think that's where that's kind of the thing that was bouncing around in my head thinking about that question. But I think you're absolutely right. People are at the core. I mean, I think people are the staying power of these stories. Like all the stories, when I look back 5 years or more, they are not stories that I hold on my own. The stories that I care to retell or to think about all have people with them. We were there when do you remember this? Right. And I think that is something that, I imagine other industries are littered with, but man, I wouldn't want to trade that in the way that it permeates specialty coffee for anything.
I mean, if you think about it, the four of us have 100 travel stories of like, I was bouncing around on this road and then this happened and then this guy showed up and something dangerous happened or something funny happened or something cool happened. None of us volunteered those stories, right? Because that maybe seemed like what we thought was the allure of this thing. It turned out not to be the allure of this thing.
Right.
It's the kind of stories that we told.
Yeah. And this will be another story for the books in many years to come. There's already the lore that we have, recording season 1 as we put the X-Files up and remember the times, late on the East Coast evenings. And I don't know, it's a cool thing to think about and to consider looking ahead. But
Thanks, guys.
Thank you, Mike.
thank you.
Thank you.
I'm Batman.
You've been listening to the Exchange Coffee Podcast, hosted by Mark Inman and Todd Mackey and produced by me, Mike Ferguson. The Exchange theme music is Exchange by Lo-Fi Zoo. Here comes your postscript, but stick around for some housekeeping on the other side.
Hello, everyone. Mark Inman here with today's
I can
Are you
give it
sure?
a whack. Keep
No,
going.
you got it? I'm off. I need more coffee.
I find it so hard to recover in that type of.
If you enjoy this or any show on the Exchange Coffee Podcasting Network, please consider leaving a review and please subscribe if you haven't already and tell people about us. You'll find a link to our listener survey in the show notes. Please take the survey. And remember 2 things. 1, you can email us at theexchange@kavoya.com. And 2, Black Coffee is performed by the one and only Ella Fitzgerald.